Revelation chapter 20.
Mommy, I cold.
I'm going to read the first 7 verses. Revelation chapter 20. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit with a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. And cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that he must be loosed a little season. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus, and for the word of God, which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. But the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Blessed and holy is he that hath part in the first resurrection. On such the second death hath no power, but they shall be priests of God and of Christ, and shall reign with him 1,000 years. When the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, we thank you for this word. We thank you for your Bible. We thank you for what you tell us. Lord, even though sometimes we have a hard time understanding it and we don't completely know what you're trying to tell us, pray, Lord, that you give us wisdom and insight so we might follow you and trust you and give you our lives. We ask you to bless this evening in Jesus' name. Amen. Because of the discussion we had last week, I decided to go back and relook at some things. Laura asked a couple of questions, and I was thinking about it. I told Laura that I didn't think the 1,000 years was going to be as idyllic as what I've always heard it been painted as. Well, I went back and relooked at it, okay? And I think I may have been wrong, at least in part, maybe completely wrong. But there is something about it, and I do want to look at that a little bit this evening. We do know that there's going to be a 1,000-year millennium. We call it that. We looked at that a little bit last week, or quite a bit, I should say, last week. There will be a definite 1,000-year period. It's mentioned 6 times in this chapter, 6 verses in a row, and it says 1,000 years. Doesn't have vague ways of saying it. Doesn't say times and a half a time, or 1,260 days. It says 1,000 years, 6 different times in 6 different ways, referring to this time period. It also says that the king is going to be there. We know that King Jesus came back from heaven. He has raptured his saints. He's called everybody together, and he's defeated the armies at Armageddon. And now he's going to set up his kingdom, and we looked at the kingdom. We know who the king is going to be. We looked at that. But I wanted to go back to this point on what kind of a world is it going to be. And I looked at a couple things, and I want to start with. Number one, Jesus Christ is sitting on the throne.
This is for the 1,000 years.
This is for the 1,000 years, okay? Jesus Christ is sitting on the throne. What's different about Jesus Christ?
Justice is good.
He's risen from the dead. That's not something everybody has. That's not something everybody's going through, okay? So he's a supernatural being. He is the king. I believe he's in bodily form. I believe he's recognizable as Jesus Christ. I believe if he showed up and it had some people show up that knew him at the time, they would recognize him as Jesus Christ. But he is a supernatural being. That's the first thing I was thinking about. The second thing, who is reigning with him?
Saints?
All the saints.
The saints. The tribulation saints, the church saints, the old-time saints, the Old Testament saints, all the saints of God, the armies of God that came back with him, the ones that he's redeemed and the ones that followed him all the way through, they're reigning with him. They've been given thrones and authority and dominion and crowns, and they're sitting there and ruling and reigning with him. What's special about them?
They're supernatural too.
They're supernatural too. So this is not the same world. I made the comment, and I was thinking this way, and I guess I've thought this way for a while, that this is recognizing this is a continuation of the world that we see around us, okay? We got trees, and we got people that are planting, and we eat food that grows, and we eat cattle, and we eat sheep, and we eat different things that we find here on the earth. Everything that's natural we can eat, that we can go on. We have all this, and that is going to continue on. We still have people that are marrying, and they're having kids, and they're going through life, and they're working, and they're doing all the different things. So it's still the same world in a sense, but there is a difference. We have a supernatural king, and we have supernatural leaders and administrators, and that's going to change the focus of it. The more I thought about it, I think there's a reason for it. Where do I start?
At the beginning.
Let me see. What happened to Adam and Eve? Start at the beginning, girl.
They sinned.
They sinned. What happened to them? When they sinned, what happened? They died.
Yeah, they said they were going to die.
They died. God said, the day that you eat of that tree, you're going to die. Now, physically, in their mortal body, did they fall over and die? Did we bury them? No. But somehow they died. Okay? Thinking about it, I've wondered about this. It also says that when this happened, they knew that they were naked. They hadn't recognized that before. I don't think it's because they couldn't see.
No.
I think they had something that they didn't realize. They had the life of God. They had a presence from God. They had a life that God had given them. I'm not sure if that was a type of clothing that they had, some sort of spiritual clothing. The Bible talks about being clothed on with our spiritual body, being clothed upon with something from God. I don't know that. This is my opinion. This is my thinking, my imagination. But somehow they knew something was different, and they were naked, and they knew it, and they weren't trying to cover themselves.
I think they were innocent.
That may be. That's what I've heard a lot too. Okay. My thinking on this line was they realized something was different. They recognized that they were naked, and they tried to cover them, and the world started degenerating. What does Romans chapter 3 verse 23 says?
For all have sinned.
And then what does 6:23 say?
The wages of sin is death.
Okay, what is death? Now, let me look at something else real quick. Look at Galatians chapter 6. Going the wrong direction. Now, I'm doing this for sake of the discussion because I thought it was a good point. Just a thinking about it. My thinking. Maybe not yours, but mine. Galatians chapter 6, if I can turn my pages. Starting in verse 7, it says, Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap corruption. But he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. Now my thinking is this. The more we have sin in this world, the more corrupt the world gets. The more depraved it gets, the more problems we have. I mean, I don't know about you, but I look at our country right now and I see idiocy running rampant. You know, we talking jokingly about, the inmates are running the asylum. And that's more or less what I see. And I've heard people from Mexico say the same thing about Mexico. It's not just in the U.S., it's all over the world. The more you turn away from God, the more problems you're going to have. And the more you sow to the flesh, the more death you're going to reap. The more corruption you sow to the flesh, you're going to reap corruption. So I'm trying to put these two ideas together, supernatural beings, and the absence of this corruption that's just filling up the world. And so I can see where it talks about having this world where all of a sudden, but where it comes to a point where you can have a lion and a lamb sitting down together. you can have certain things happening that aren't natural today because sin is going to be abated. Sin is going to be held at check. Sin is going to be held at bay. My sir, if I'm getting my words out right. I don't know if you're understanding the concept I'm trying to make here. But look at a couple of things. Look at Deuteronomy chapter 28. I'm going to go through on type of world number 8, God's desired world. Let's go through a few of these just very quickly. I say quickly. There's too many verses to go through quickly.
Chapter 8?
Chapter 28.
Oh, I thought you said 8 too.
Deuteronomy chapter 28. I'm sorry. And I'm going to start reading in verse 1. And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to observe and to do all his commandments which I command thee this day, that the Lord thy God will set thee on high above all nations of the earth, and all these blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God. Blessed shalt thou be in the city, and blessed shalt thou be in the field. Blessed shall be the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy ground, and the fruit of thy cattle, the increase of thy kind, and the flocks of thy sheep. Blessed shall be thy basket and thy store. Blessed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and blessed shalt thou be when thou goest out. The Lord shall cause thine enemies that rise up against thee to be smitten before thy face. They shall come out against thee one way, and flee before thee 7 ways. The Lord shall command the blessing upon thee in thy storehouses, and in all that thou settest thine hand unto, and he shall bless thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. The Lord shall establish thee an holy people unto himself, as he hath sworn unto thee, if thou shalt keep the commandments of the Lord thy God and walk in his ways. And all the people of the earth shall see that thou art called by the name of the Lord, and they shall be afraid of thee. The Lord shall make thee plenteous in goods, in the fruit of thy body, and in the fruit of thy cattle, and in the fruit of thy ground, in the land which the Lord sware unto thy fathers to give thee. The Lord shall open to thee his good treasure, the heaven to give thee rain unto thy land in his season, to bless all the work of thine hand. Thou shalt lend unto many nations, and thou shalt not borrow. And the Lord shall make thee the head, not the tail. Thou shalt be above only, and thou shalt not be beneath, if that thou hearken unto the commandments of the Lord thy God, which I commanded this day, to observe and to do them. Thou shalt not go aside from any of the words which I commanded this day to the right hand or to the left, to go after other gods to serve them. I don't know if you see the point here. That is what God wanted for Israel from way back when. You find that in more than just one place in the Bible, this idea that God was trying to build a nation that the rest of the world would look at and say, I would like to be like that nation. I'd like to have the blessings that nation has. I'd like to have the strength and all that goes with it. That's the nation that I would like to be like. He even says that, and I don't know if I've got those verses in here, but he says that so that they could be the example for the rest of the world. The rest of the world would want to follow. I want to know about your God. That's the blessing he wanted for them. This was God's desired world. Okay? And he tells them, if you go in here and you do what I tell you to, you follow me, I will bless you. Now imagine a world where we've got 1,000 years of Jesus Christ sitting on the throne, and we don't have this absolute freedom, or the idea, this imagined freedom, if you will, to go out and do anything we want to do and follow all of our lust and follow all of our sin. And we're following strictly after Jesus Christ and his commandments, because he's sitting on the throne and we've got all sorts of people controlling and making sure we do what we're supposed to do. Don't you think the world is going to get a little bit better? I think so. Okay? And yeah, that was my thinking. After I made that comment last week, I got to thinking about it. I said, Eddie, I think you made a mistake. I do think that some of these verses that we looked at and some of the verses I gave last week on this fantastic world where the lion and the lamb lay down together, where the child can play on the nest of an asp, and you're going to have all these, no problems, then how do you get there? I think it's going to be a natural reaction. I think it's going to be a natural progression, if you will. Because Jesus is on the throne, because righteousness is going to reign, because more and more people are going to follow after righteousness, simply because they have to, if you will. but we will see it increase in the blessings that flow naturally from serving God. One thing we know already, anybody who pays attention to life knows that people who follow God and follow the rules that God has laid down live better, they live longer, they have better health, they do better in most things all the way through their life. How do you know? Somebody gets to following God, they decide, okay, I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to quit doing drugs. Well, that obviously extends their life. It obviously helps their life. It obviously helps them do a lot of things. They quit running around on their wives, or they quit running around on their husbands, or whatever else. That obviously helps their relationship. It helps their mental health. It helps their physical health. It helps all sorts of other things. It's just better. It helps their family. Their families are more stable. They decide, okay, I'm going to live right with my wife. I'm going to live right with my husband. I'm going to do things that I should. I'm going to try and be a good husband. I'm going to try and be a good wife. I'm going to try and be a good father and a good mother. I'm going to try and build a good family. All of these things simply because they're trying to follow what God has taught us, and we have a better society. One thing we know for sure is that where families are solid, nations are solid. Where families are strong, all the way through history, when families are strong, nations are strong. Yeah, you can have all the wealth in the world, but if there's not an integral, a core value of loyalty to family, loyalty to God, loyalty to community, loyalty to that, you don't have strength in the nation, strength in the community. One of the problems we have right now is that nobody has a core value that everybody can agree on. We're no longer, this is America. You can see that. We can all see that. I think we can look at it. We've got too many different ideas, too many pulling different ways, trying to do different things because they're all going their own way. There's no core direction. They've given up God's direction in the Bible. They've given up what God has said. They don't want what God has said, so they're going their own way. And we're going away from what God wanted, that desired world. So I said that last week about it not being much different, and that those other things were going to be in the new heavens and the new earth. And I went back and looked at a lot of these verses, trying to go through them and make sure I was understanding it. And there are some passages that make it difficult to follow. But I wanted to point out, we've got supernatural beings running it. We've got righteousness. We're following God. We have the promises of God, the teaching of God, that He wanted to build a world like this. That's what He wants to see in this world. And I feel He's going to build it and show us that we can have that world if we would just follow Him. So I think we'll see it. Now see if we can look at some of these passages. Let me see if I can find the right one. Look at Isaiah chapter 2. Isaiah 2. Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2 says, "And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow into it. And many people shall go and say, Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and He will teach us of His ways, and we will walk in His paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge among the nations, and shall rebuke many people. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." Remember those passages? You probably heard those preached different times in your life. They're going to beat their swords into plowshares and their pruning hooks and their spears into pruning hooks. That's peace. They're not building weapons of war. I don't know if you remember the old, what they used to call them, Negro spirituals. Ain't going to teach me war, no, ain't going to learn war no more. Things like that. But these are prophecies from the Old Testament. Look at chapter 11, Isaiah chapter 11. Starting in verse 4. It says, "But with righteousness shall He judge the poor, and reprove with equity for the meek of the earth. And He shall smite the earth with the rod of His mouth, and with the breath of His lips shall He slay the wicked. And righteousness shall be the girdle of His loins, and faithfulness the girdle of His reins. The wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. And the cow and the bear shall feed, their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. And The suckling child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice den. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. So we have this tremendous change in what we think of as nature. We look at nature and say, okay, well, you can't go play with a lion. We're even told, we even have laws that certain people, you can't keep certain kinds of pets because they're dangerous. Even people who keep them have to be very careful. I know of a friend of a friend that had lions in southeast Texas and played with them, had them for years, and did something wrong one day, and it killed him. Just that fast. You can't change the spots of a leopard. You can't change the nature of an animal. Certain beasts are wild. That's what we think. I know that when I see a snake, my wife wants me to kill it right away. Why? Because we don't trust them. I don't want my kids playing with snakes. I don't want to even think about playing with snakes. But here we're talking about a different type of a world. How did we get here? God hasn't regenerated the world yet. But there is going to be a righteousness. There is going to be a change in it. Now, I've got some other things that I'm not going to go through, but I do want to look at some things. Look at Isaiah chapter 65. Second to last chapter in Isaiah, chapter 65. Now all of these are on here. I'm looking at difficult prophecies on your outline right here. Starting in verse 17. It says, "For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered nor come into mind. But be ye glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing, and her people a joy. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem and joy in my people, and the voice of weeping shall be no more heard in her, nor the voice of crying. There shall no more be an infant of days, nor an old man that hath not filled his days. For the child shall die 100 years old, but the sinner being 100 years old shall be accursed. They shall build houses and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For as the days of a tree are the days of my people and mine elect, shall long enjoy the work of their hands. They shall not labor in vain, nor bring forth for trouble, for they are the seed of the blessed of the Lord, and their offspring with them." Did I read all of that? Through 25. "And it shall come to pass that before they call I will answer, and while they are yet speaking I will hear. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together, and the lion shall eat straw like the bullock, and dust shall be the serpent's meat. They shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, saith the Lord." Now that sounds like what we were talking about, right? Where the wolf and the lamb are going to lie down together, and all this peace. What's different? What's different in this passage? It says a new heaven and a new earth. I bring this up to point out that some of these passages are very difficult to understand and to follow, simply because there is going to come a regeneration, and we're going to get to that when we get past this, to get to the new heavens and the earth, because God says he's going to create a new heaven and a new earth. But we have passages like this. Thank you, son. Have passages like this where it talks about this idea that they shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain. The wolf and the lamb shall feed together, and the lion shall eat straw like the bullock. And we think, okay, that's the same thing. That's what it looks like, the same thing that we were just talking about. So it gets a little confusing to say, okay, just because this says that applies over here. You need to be careful. This is also an example of prophecy, and one of the problems with looking at prophecy anywhere in the Bible is that sometimes we can see a prophecy and we look at it and say, wow, I understand that, I can see that. It seems to all go together, and yet God has it being fulfilled in two different places. Just like we talked about, we have the prophecies of Jesus Christ coming. He's going to be born of a virgin. He's going to be born in Bethlehem. These were prophecies that were given long before he was born. These were prophecies that God gave, so they knew him, so they had him. When the wise men showed up in Bethlehem, they knew where to go look for the new baby because the prophecies were there. They said, go to Bethlehem. That's where the king's going to be born. So they went, and they found the king. But those prophecies go on, and all of a sudden we find out that when he came, he was going to come to die, and we have prophecies of that. He also was going to come and be the king, and we have prophecies for that. But they were looking for him to take over the kingdom right then. They didn't see the death beforehand, the suffering beforehand, and then coming back later to establish a kingdom and this time period that we call the church age, this period of grace in between. So prophecies can be hard to follow. So that's the only thing I'm pointing out here. I'm not trying to say that I got it all figured out. I don't. It's not that easy. But when you look at it, sometimes you got prophecies and you have to look at them. They may be fulfilled at different time frames, different time periods, and the same prophecy may seem to apply to both of them, or one part to one part to the other. I wanted to point that out. Difficult prophecies. Look at Isaiah chapter 66 and verse 16. For by fire and by his sword will the Lord plead with all flesh, and the slain of the Lord shall be many. They that sanctify themselves and purify themselves in the gardens behind one tree in the midst, eating swine's flesh and the abomination, and the mouse shall be consumed together, saith the Lord, for I know their works and their thoughts. It shall come, I will gather all nations and tongues, and they shall come and see my glory. And I will set a sign among them, and I will send those that escape of them unto the nations, to Tarshish, Pool, and Lud, that draw the bow, to Tubal and Jarvan, to the isles afar off, that have not heard my fame, neither have seen my glory, and they shall declare my glory among the Gentiles. They shall bring all your brethren for an offering unto the Lord out of all nations upon horses, and in chariots, and in litters, and upon mules, and upon swift beasts, to my holy mountain Jerusalem, saith the Lord, as the children of Israel bring an offering in a clean vessel unto the house of the Lord. And I will also take of them for priests and for Levites, saith the Lord. For as the new heavens and the new earth, which I will make, shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith the Lord. They shall go forth and look upon the carcasses of them, of the men that have transgressed against me, for their worm shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched. They shall be an abhorring unto all flesh. But here again, we have this prophecy talking about this kingdom where the king is sitting on the throne in Jerusalem, and all the Gentile nations, the nations are coming to present their glory and to worship the Lord and to pay their respects unto the Lord month by month or nation by nation as they come into Jerusalem. And here it talks about new heavens and a new earth. Is this going to happen in the new heaven and the new earth? It's just happening in the millennial kingdom. So it's not easy sometimes to follow these. You have to look at them. But yeah, Laura, to your question last week, okay, I think I was wrong in the way I looked at it. I think we're going to start. He's going to cleanse the world of all the armies that were fighting against him and protect and save Jerusalem. He's going to start a new kingdom. And I think it's going to get to the point where because righteousness is going to abound, where sin is not going to be allowed to abound, we're going to have a better world. Does that make sense? Okay, I'm sorry. Any questions on that? So the idea of corruption, the idea of supernatural beings being in charge of it, I do think there's going to be a different type of a world, and we're going to see it. So, now, there was another question that came up. I did this.
Thank you. Oh. All right, Doc. Let's get the chili.
Do you want something?
Huh?
Do you want to get your
No, not that bad.
Y'all take the share. Did I give you two? No, should be 4 pages. Should be 4 pages. This is my timeline I did it. It's a little bit different from the one you just brought. But we were talking about timelines, and Laura was asking a little bit more about seeing how it could be displayed. So I tried to do this. The first page, I have the creation and the flood. And a little bit beyond that, I don't know exactly what to call some of it. Creation starts at year one. That's the way most historians go back, and most people who do it go back to year one, so I called it year one. When I first did this, I called it year zero. Doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But you have the creation, then you have, that's when Adam was created, then Seth was born, Enos, and all the way down through till you get to Methuselah, then you get to Noah, and Noah goes through the flood. The flood occurs in the year 1656. 1,656 years after the creation, after Adam was created, and probably very shortly after Cain and Abel were born. So the flood destroys man and the earth in 1656. Noah leaves the ark. He lives for another 350 years, even after this. If you go through and you start reading the accounts of it, you'll find that each successive generation lives a shorter period of time till they get down to the time of Moses, when he lived about 120 years, and they were living about 100 years or so. But then when you get down to the time of David, and even Moses noticed that the average lifespan of man was 70 years. You'll find that in his psalm, Psalm 90 in the Psalms. The 90th psalm is his psalm, and he says that the days of man are 70 years. So that's the average lifespan. But all the way down through, we got down to the bottom, the very first one, the year 2006, from the creation. See, one of these days that won't be happening. I have an example. So we've got the first 2,000 years on the first page, if you will, as in 1,000 years unto the Lord is one day, so that's the first 2 days, if you will. I'm giving you a timeline. I'm not even trying to think this is dogmatic in any way. Then you have the nation of Israel from the time of Abraham. Abram is born about 2,000 years after creation. He goes through and he bears Isaac, and they bear Jacob and Esau. Jacob turns out to be Israel. Israel has the 12 tribes of Israel. They go down into Egypt, and Moses goes down and brings them out and creates the nation of Israel, called out by God. And they go into the land of Israel, and they occupy the land of Israel for about 800 years. A little bit more, a little bit less. It's a little bit hard to judge sometimes. The numbering on it is funny. They're conquered. First of all, they split. After Solomon's reign, the tribes split. 10 tribes went north. They're called Samaria. And you have Judah and Benjamin stayed. They're called Judah, different kingdoms. The stories that you find in 1st and 2nd Kings are the kings, both sides of the kingdoms. And the ones that you find in 1st and 2nd Chronicles are the kings of Judah. A little bit more detail about the kings of Judah and more of the chronology and the genealogies of those people.
So is Samaria the Samaritans?
Yes.
So they were the tribes that then became pariahs?
Okay. What happened is that when Samaria was conquered by the Assyrians, they kept, they would make leagues and whatever, they would pay tribute, then they would rebel, and back and forth. And finally, Assyria came in and they destroyed them. They wiped them out, they defeated them, and then they carried them away and moved them to different parts of the world. They sent their own people in, different people from other parts of the world, to come in and become the inhabitants of the land. So some of them mingled with some of the Jews that were left. Some of them were never actually Jews, but there is this half-tribe, there is this mix, there is a non-Jewish. So when Jesus is talking about Samaritans and going through Samaria, it's not all Jews and they're half-breed Jews. There's a lot of problems with that. So that's where that comes from. And about 60 or 80 years after Israel is destroyed and moved out, Nebuchadnezzar finally wipes out Jerusalem, knocks it down flat, takes everybody out, sends them to the round of the world, and carries them off captive. And that's when, 11 years before that happens, Daniel's carried off to Babylon. And that's where you get the stories of Daniel. Chapter 1 was when he's being carried off into Babylon. He lives there, probably lived about 90 years, maybe 70, 85 years in Babylon. I don't know how old he was when he died. It doesn't tell us. But we have so many of the prophecies that we get, that we're going to study and we look at, come from Daniel. But that was the time frame he was in, after the destruction. Jeremiah had a prophecy 70 years after this happens, that God has named a king named Cyrus. He's going to be the king, and he's going to send them back to rebuild Jerusalem and the temple. And he does. The very first year, one of the first things he does, he sends them back to rebuild the temple. And they go back and they rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, they rebuild the temple, and Daniel has this vision a little bit after that, that about the four kingdoms and the kingdoms that are coming, and those visions from chapter 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 of Daniel are those prophecies. The first prophecy he saw was in Daniel chapter 2, the vision of Nebuchadnezzar, the dream of Nebuchadnezzar, and the four kingdoms and the fifth kingdom, which is the kingdom of Jesus Christ. So that's where we get that. That's where we get some of these prophecies and some of these ideas. But he had the vision, the telling of Daniel's 70 weeks that we talked about early on when we started this study. His 70 weeks, 490 years, that finishes the time frame. That's the second 2,000-year period. And that's where we get to here, and that gets all the way down to Messiah being born, Jesus Christ being born. And so that's the second 2,000-year period. Jesus came, he died, he rose again, he started his church. He told them that I'm going to build my church and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. We have a little bit of that history, prehistory if you will, when we talked about the 7 churches of Revelation. And I mentioned them here. I gave you some dates. Whether they're exactly accurate, I don't know. It's just a guess. I didn't really go over the dates when I was looking at these in Revelation. I was looking at something a little bit different. My point was, but if you look at it, these are the dates, and it comes through. So we got 2,000 years of church history. 2,000 years we're not under the law, and we're not under the temple rule. We're not under having to go to the temple and do sacrifices. We go straight to Jesus Christ, who is our sacrifice, who died on the cross of Calvary for us. He is the one that we go to for redemption. He's the one we go to for forgiveness of sins. We don't have to go through a priest because he is our high priest. That's the church age. That lasts for about 2,000 years, in my opinion. And then we have the Great Tribulation, which is what we've been looking at, which hasn't happened yet, but it's coming. Okay? And then we have the millennium. Is that a timeline you can follow, Laura?
Yes.
Okay, does this help graphically? This was a lot of work for me.
Well, I appreciate it.
But I enjoyed it. I really did. I always enjoyed doing the timeline of the creation all the way down through Abraham and through the kings. I'm not very good at it, but I enjoy doing it. Anybody have any questions on that? Well, I'm running out of time. Once again, I'm running out of time. Somebody needs to come up with questions because I don't have time to start the next section.
Any questions?
Any questions?